Hey everyone, today I'm going to be doing my spring book haul. There are 19 books in this video which range from science fiction, fantasy, horror, humour and a classic. First of all, I will start with science fiction, the first of which is The Moon is a Harsh Mistress by Robert Heinlein. This edition is the SF Masterworks, which is done by Gollancz. As you know, I really like the Masterworks editions. I have many of them by this point. Robert Heinlein is a very well known and popular author in science fiction. He was a big author in the 60s and the 70s, I believe, and he's still very influential today. He sadly died a number of years ago, and this is one of his rather well known ones. It's about a penal colony on the moon, and there's some sort of revolution or some sort of big event happening, and things are not quite as they seem. And I've been curious about this for quite some time, and I've been wanting to read Heinlein for a very long time as well, and now I actually have one of his books. The next book is also a SF Masterworks edition, and that is Dune by Frank Herbert. As you may know, I already have a copy of this. It's actually the fairly normal paperback version, and frankly I saw this in the Masterworks and I couldn't help buy it. I have read Dune every year for the previous 10 years, and this year is no exception. This will be the 11th time I've read Dune, and now I've got a rather more interesting looking copy of it. Now the next 4 books are all related to Dune, and I'm very pleased with them because they are Children of Dune, God Emperor of Dune, Heretics of Dune, and Chapter House of Dune. Frank Herbert wrote 6 Dune books. The second is Dune Messiah, which I already have, and now I own all 6 of them. And I am very pleased with these. They are 4 matching editions. Annoyingly, the second book, which I have here, this does not match, and for some reason it's not available in the same publisher as the other 4, which is irritating, but you know, what can you do? I am really happy that I've got these because I've been wanting to read the further Dune books for quite some time now, and now I'll finally read the entire saga as Frank Herbert originally envisioned it. The next 2 books are sequels to a book I've only fairly recently read, and that is Counter Zero by William Gibson and Mona Lisa Overdrive, also by Gibson. These are the same 2 editions as the first book that I have, which is Neuromancer, and now I have a full matching trilogy. The trilogy itself is called the Sprawl Trilogy. The only one that is mainly known, of course, is Neuromancer. This is considered the father of cyberpunk, essentially, and Gibson is credited to having created the cyberpunk genre. And I really like this, so now I'm going to read the other 2. The last science fiction book of this haul is The Illustrated Man by Ray Bradbury. I've recently become a big fan of Bradbury due to the Martian Chronicles, as you may know. And this sounds really interesting. It is a series of short stories. There is about 21 of them in this book, and it sounds a really interesting idea. The stories have been tattooed onto a man, and the tattoos are alive, and that is each short story by itself. It sounds really curious, and I'm very eager to read more Bradbury. Next it's on to the fantasy books, the first of which is a trilogy, and that is the Mistress Trilogy by Raymond E. Feist and Janie Wirtz. This is made up of Daughter of the Empire, Servant of the Empire, and it's massive, and Mistress of the Empire. Not quite as massive, almost though. This is a fantasy series set in Feist's Riftwar world. There are 30 books overall within the world, and they're all made up of different trilogies in different parts of the world at different times, so they are not continuations of one giant storyline. There are links between them, of course. This trilogy sounds a bit interesting to me because it is the only set of books within the world that he actually co-wrote with another author, and it is one of the few that features a female character as the lead character. So it should be quite an interesting set of books to read. The next 3 books were recommended to me by people on Twitter. I asked on Twitter several weeks ago for recommendations on classic and important fantasy books, and people gave me lots of suggestions, and the first of which is Little Big by John Crowley. This is the Fantasy Masterworks series by Gollancz. This is the fantasy version of the SF Masterworks, obviously, and this is the first in that line I've got. This sounds really interesting. The story sounds really peculiar. It is about a really peculiar house and a series of characters, and they are related to this house in some way. I don't really know much about the story, but I've been wanting to read something by John Crowley for quite a while now, and this is the first, so I'm quite excited about this book. Oh, and this was recommended to me by Kevin as well. The next book was recommended to me by Brianne, and that is a very well known one, Warship Down by Richard Adams. This is about a series of animals that go on some kind of adventure. I do not know much about this book at all. I've never really paid much attention to it. I know it is a classic children's fantasy tale from what I know, and it sounds really good, and it also looks beautiful. It also has a slightly oddly textured cover which feels really nice. I don't normally go around feeling my books up, by the way, but this really does feel different. This next book was recommended to me by Terry, and that is The Complete Lioness by Jack Vance. I am unsure if you pronounce the title as Lioness or Leoness. I'm not entirely sure. If anybody knows, let me know. This is a fantasy series that I was already somewhat aware of, but to be honest I didn't really pay much attention to it until Terry mentioned it, and then I looked into it properly, and it sounds really interesting. This is actually the bind up version essentially of all 4 of the series, hence the name being The Complete Lioness, and it is very large and very heavy. It looks beautiful, although where I'm going to fit it on my shelves I'm not entirely sure. This is taller than my shelves, so it's going to be interesting to place on them. The next book, I believe you class it as a classic, but I'm not entirely sure, and that is The Prose Edda by Snorri Sturluson. I think that's how you pronounce it. It's Icelandic. This was written a very long time ago, several thousand years in fact, and it is basically a series of stories about the Viking mythology or the Norse mythology, as Odin and Loki, not the one from the Marvel films either. And it just sounds really interesting. It's just a very small book, and it just really interests me because I've always had an interest in that kind of mythology, and now I'll actually know something about it properly. The next book is classed as humour with a science fiction edge to it, and that is The Humans by Matt Haig. This sounds really interesting. It is about a man who isn't actually a man, he's an alien as far as I'm aware, but he doesn't know that he's an alien. He just knows something is weird one day. It sounds really weird, and it's apparently quite funny as well, with some really interesting thoughts on what it means to be human. So I'm very eager to read this. It's not very large either, so it should be a nice quick read one day. The penultimate book is Misery by Stephen King. This is a psychological horror, I believe you'd class it as, and this book is very well known at this point. There obviously was a film made of it. It is about an author who has just killed off his biggest character. He has an accident on an icy road, and then a mad fan rescues him and wants him to rewrite the character back to life. That's all I know of it, thankfully, and I'm very eager to read more by Stephen King, and it's a harder edition as well, so it will go very nicely on the shelf, just out of shot there. And finally, the last book is Lies' Story by Stephen King. This is a psychological horror. I brought this purposely because a few days ago it was Chris's birthday, otherwise known as the Reading Road, and I know that Stephen King is his favourite author and Liza's Story is his favourite book. So essentially this is Chris's favourite book ever, pretty much. So I thought it's about time I actually read the thing and then I can understand why Chris loves this book so much. It does sound really, really good. So I will get around to it probably within the next few months. Although maybe I might leave it till October. And then I can read it as a Halloween read. I'll see. So that's it for all the videos that I bought recently. If you've read any of these, then please let me know. If you want to read them, then also let me know and we can have a talk about them. The links to the people that I've mentioned will be in the description box below, of course, as they always are, along with my Twitter and my Goodreads link. And that's pretty much it for this video. So thank you for watching and I'll see you another day. Bye for now.